My ex's mom knocked on my door at 11 p.m., and whispered, I didn't know where else to go. At exactly 11:07 on a cold Thursday night, someone knocked on my apartment door 3 times. Not the impatient knock of a delivery driver. Not the casual tap of a neighbor. It was slow. Careful. Almost frightened. I had no idea that opening that door would force me to face the one family I had spent 2 years trying to forget. When I looked through the peephole, my heart stopped. Standing beneath the weak yellow light in the hallway was my ex-girlfriend's mother. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. She was still wearing the elegant coat I remembered from family dinners, but something about her looked completely different. Her hair was soaked from the rain, her face was pale, and she was clutching a small black handbag against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her together. I opened the door halfway. She looked at me for several seconds before her eyes filled with tears. Then she whispered the words that changed everything. I didn't know where else to go. If you believe that kindness can sometimes reach people when nothing else can, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the person standing outside our door isn't asking for money, forgiveness, or even love. Sometimes they're simply asking for one more chance to feel safe. 2 years earlier, I had been deeply in love with her daughter, Claire. Claire and I had met during the worst year of my life. My father had passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind debts, a small house that needed repairs, and a grief I didn't know how to carry. Claire had been patient with me. She listened when I couldn't talk. She brought coffee to my apartment when I forgot to eat. She made me laugh when laughing felt almost disrespectful. For 3 years, she was my home. And then, somehow, we became strangers. The breakup hadn't happened because of one dramatic betrayal. There had been no cheating, no screaming match, no shattered plates. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it hurt more. Claire had received an opportunity to move across the country for a prestigious job. I had asked her to wait because my life was falling apart financially and emotionally. She told me she couldn't keep putting her future on hold. I told her I understood. But I didn't. 3 days later, she left. Her mother, Eleanor, blamed me. At the time, I understood why. She had watched her daughter come home crying, and from her perspective, I was the man who had failed to give Claire the future she deserved. The last time Eleanor had spoken to me, she had stood outside Claire's apartment and told me that some people loved each other but were still wrong for each other. I never forgot those words. So when she appeared at my door at 11 o'clock at night, my first instinct was to close it. But then I noticed her hands. They were trembling. I stepped aside. She entered without saying another word. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere downstairs, an elevator groaned as it moved between floors. I offered her a towel and a glass of water. She sat on the edge of my couch, staring at the floor. Finally, she opened her handbag and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside was a hospital bracelet. My stomach tightened. She told me that Claire had been in a serious car accident 3 weeks earlier. I couldn't breathe. Claire had survived, but she had suffered a complicated leg injury and a concussion. She was recovering physically, but the accident had changed more than her body. Her job was gone. Her apartment lease was ending. Her savings had disappeared into medical expenses. And worse, Eleanor had recently discovered that Claire's father had been secretly struggling with gambling debts for years. Creditors had begun calling the family. Their house was at risk. Eleanor had spent weeks trying to keep everything together. Then that evening, she discovered something that broke her. Claire had been asking about me. Not directly. She had been looking through old photographs. She had asked Eleanor whether I was still living in the same apartment. She had even asked whether I had ever gotten married. Eleanor told me she didn't understand why Claire was asking those questions. But she did understand one thing. Her daughter still hadn't completely let me go. I sat there in silence. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to say that Claire had made her choice. I wanted to remind Eleanor that 2 years earlier, she had looked me in the eyes and told me to stay away from her daughter. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Where is Claire now? Eleanor looked up. At the hospital. Then she started crying. Not the quiet kind. The kind of crying that comes after someone has been strong for too long. She told me she had come to me because she had nowhere else to turn. She needed someone who knew Claire before the accident. Someone Claire trusted. Someone who wouldn't treat her like a broken person. I didn't answer immediately. Because deep down, I knew exactly what Eleanor was asking. She wasn't asking me to get back together with Claire. She was asking me to show up. And those were two very different things. The next morning, I drove to the hospital. I sat in my car for almost 20 minutes before going inside. I was terrified. Not because I didn't care. Because I cared too much. When I finally entered Claire's room, she was asleep. She looked smaller than I remembered. There was a bandage near her forehead, and 4 in her arm, and a brace around her leg. I stood beside the bed, unable to move. Then her eyes opened. For a moment, she simply stared at me. I expected surprise. Instead, I saw something much more painful. Relief. Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't ask why I had come. She didn't ask whether I still loved her. She simply reached toward the chair beside the bed. I sat down. For the next hour, we talked about everything except the past. She told me about the hospital food. I told her about my terrible cooking. She laughed softly. It was the first time I had heard that laugh in 2 years. And for a moment, the walls between us disappeared. But reality returned quickly. Claire needed months of rehabilitation. Her mother's finances were collapsing. The house was nearly lost. And Claire was terrified that she would never walk normally again. I began visiting after work. At first, I brought groceries. Then I started helping Eleanor with paperwork. I contacted people I knew about affordable rehabilitation programs. I helped Claire practice using her crutches. Some days she was hopeful. Other days she was furious. There were mornings when she told me to leave because she hated seeing pity in people's eyes. I never told her I pitied her. Because I didn't. I admired her. She was fighting. And slowly, something changed. Not between Claire and me. Between all of us. Eleanor stopped treating me like an outsider. She started telling me stories about Claire as a child. I learned that Claire had once broken her mother's favorite vase and blamed the family dog. I learned that she had been terrified of thunderstorms until she was 16. I learned that Eleanor had kept every birthday card her daughter had ever given her. One evening, while Claire was asleep, Eleanor and I sat in the hospital cafeteria. She apologized. She said she had spent 2 years believing I wasn't good enough for her daughter. Then she admitted something else. She had been wrong. She had judged my love by what I could provide instead of what I was willing to sacrifice. I told her she didn't need to apologize. But she insisted. She said sometimes parents become so afraid of seeing their children hurt that they accidentally become another source of pain. Those words stayed with me. Weeks passed. Claire's recovery improved. But just when things seemed to be getting better, another problem arrived. The hospital informed Claire that her insurance wouldn't cover several months of rehabilitation. Without treatment, her recovery could be severely delayed. Eleanor wanted to sell the house. Claire refused. I went home that night and stared at my bank account. I didn't have enough to solve everything. But I had some savings. Money I had been keeping for a new car. I transferred almost all of it to Claire's rehabilitation fund. I didn't tell her. I didn't want gratitude. I just wanted her to have a chance. Unfortunately, she found out. She confronted me in the hospital hallway. She was angry. She said I couldn't keep sacrificing my life for her. I told her I wasn't sacrificing my life. I was choosing what kind of person I wanted to be. She cried. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding for months. Why are you still here? I looked at her for a long time. Because the truth was simple. I still loved her. But love wasn't always about getting someone back. Sometimes love meant helping someone stand again, even if they eventually walked away from you. I told her that. She cried harder. Then she admitted she had regretted leaving me almost immediately. She had been too proud to call. She thought I hated her. I told her I never hated her. I had only been trying to survive losing her. That conversation didn't magically repair our relationship. There were still wounds. Still unanswered questions. Still years between us. But for the first time, we stopped pretending those wounds weren't there. 3 months later, Claire took her first steps without assistance. Eleanor was standing beside her. I was standing near the window. Claire looked at me. She smiled. And I realized that the woman who had once walked out of my life was now learning how to walk again. But this time, she wasn't walking away. A year later, Eleanor sold the old house and moved into a smaller place closer to Claire's rehabilitation center. Claire eventually returned to work part-time. And as for me, I bought that car I had been saving for. Not because I had rebuilt my life perfectly. But because I finally understood something. Sometimes we think closure means shutting a door forever. Sometimes it means opening the door one last time and discovering that the person standing outside isn't there to reopen the past. They're there because they need someone who remembers who they were before life became difficult. Claire and I didn't rush into another relationship. We started slowly. Coffee. Walks. Long conversations. Apologies. Laughter. Trust. We learned each other again. One evening, almost a year after that rainy night, I came home and found Eleanor waiting outside my apartment. This time, she wasn't frightened. She was smiling. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photograph. It was Claire and me from years earlier, sitting on a park bench and laughing at something neither of us could remember. On the back, Eleanor had written one sentence. "Thank you for opening the door." I looked at her. She smiled and said that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can become the beginning of someone's second chance. I thought about that night at 11:07. If I had closed the door, everything might have been different. Maybe Claire would still have recovered. Maybe Eleanor would have found another way. Maybe life would have continued. But I would never have learned that forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It simply refuses to let the past control the future. And sometimes, the person you thought came into your life to stay forever leaves because neither of you is ready. Sometimes they return years later, carrying pain instead of promises. And sometimes, the greatest love story isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about becoming the kind of person who can open the door when someone whispers, "I didn't know where else to go." If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may need a little hope tonight. And before you go, comment, "I would open the door," if you believe everyone deserves compassion, forgiveness, and a second chance. Because you never really know who might be standing on the other side of your door. Sometimes, it's someone from your past. Sometimes, it's someone who needs your help. And sometimes, it's the person who reminds you that your heart was never broken so you could stop loving. It was broken so you could learn how to love with understanding.